This is the new Ferrari 296 Speciale, and to me, that name is both exciting and a little bit worrying. You see, the last Speciale, the 458, was perhaps the greatest modern Ferrari, so to see that designation again is fabulous. However, I can't help but think Ferrari might have set the bar too high by drawing comparisons with that wild, naturally aspirated 458. A decade later, the turbocharged hybrid 296 is playing to a different set of legislative rules, and that must surely mean a very different sort of car.
If I give you mozzarella and tomatoes, you're not going to be able to make a tiramisu.
But we're going to drive it on the road and the track, in the wet and the dry, and park it in front of a jet to find out just what Ferrari has cooked up. This episode is driven by Hagerty, who, in case you don't know, provide car insurance that's designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. So, if you have a special car that you don't drive every day, like one of these perhaps, then take a trip to Hagerty.com. Or pick up the phone, give them a call, and speak to a like-minded enthusiast about a quote.
Can you put a number on fun, on thrills? That is what Ferrari has been trying to do whilst developing this, the 296 Speciale. And that might seem odd, but I kind of get it. You see, in years gone by, you would develop a car for performance, outright performance. Because if you hit those numbers, then kind of the thrills, the fun were guaranteed. But now, it's kind of flipped the other way around.
As we're all aware, the rules around emissions and noise have been essentially suffocating engines. Manufacturers have found incredible ways of maintaining performance, but emotion is much harder to generate.
So where once you had performance and you got your thrills for free, now they're focusing on making sure you have the thrills, and the performance, well, that just comes along with it. And in order to try and make this as thrilling as possible, they've had to try and put numbers to it. They won't tell us what those numbers are, a bit like the Coca-Cola recipe or the mixture of herbs and spices in a Kentucky Fried Chicken. But we do know the areas that they focused on.
The measurable areas, the fun matrix if you like, consist of longitudinal thrills, lateral thrills, braking, gear shift and sound. The feel formula. Sounds like a road tester's tick list, to be honest. So with that in mind, on with the testing.
As soon as you get into the 296 Speciale, there are obviously a few things that catch your eye over and above the GTB. So starting with these wonderful carbon door panels in here, just a single piece with the sort of pierced bits down here for the speakers. And there are no carpets in here, there's just some sort of Alcantara in terms of the soft furnishings. These seats are obviously much firmer, but I think look really cool. Also, I think it's worth mentioning the fabric of these, the colour. There's something quite retro about them. Combined with the white wheels, it's almost as though they're trying to evoke an older time.
And talking of blasts from the past, although this test car still had the haptic start-stop on the wheel, customer cars will get a physical button. Elsewhere, I happen to enjoy the ritual of clicking and tightening harnesses in cars like this and feeling locked in, but I know some people find them a nuisance. And it is worth mentioning that, like the GTB, it's not the roomiest cockpit or pedal box.
This colour, by the way, is Verde Nürburgring. Quite appropriate, given Max Verstappen's antics there recently in a 296. Whilst wet roads do mean you definitely have to have your wits about you, I've actually always enjoyed driving Ferrari's special mid-engine cars in damp conditions, even in the pouring rain, to be honest. There's just something about the precision, the quick-wittedness of the steering that means you can have them absolutely balanced on a knife edge in the wet. The gear shifts are just amazing, both upshifts, but also, say even more so, the downshifts, because the way that they punch through on the upshifts, but then the really sort of almost high RPM downshifts, the limiter downshifts, you feel it drag that rear axle. And that's something I remember ever since we've had a dual clutch gearbox. So it was in the 458 Speciale as well. And you just feel it kind of tightening the whole car into corners, setting it up almost.
Of course, the gearbox is only one facet of the drivetrain.
The 3-litre 120-degree V6, which is buried all the way down there, it is remarkably low, has been lightened for the Speciale. So it's 9 kilos lighter, which is 15% of the overall savings in the Speciale. How have they done that? Well, the crankcase and the sump, they've both been machined after casting like the 499P Le Mans car, and there's some titanium in there as well. These bolts, which, well, it's a bit like asking you to smell something, but you just have to trust me that this titanium one is lighter. And also the conrods. So this is the one actually from the F80, which is 35% lighter than this one.
The turbos are also 1.6 kilos lighter, and the total output from the engine alone, before you add in the e-motor, is 690 brake horsepower, or 36 bhp more than the GTB.
Instantly, one of the things you notice compared to the GTB is the sound. There are twice the number of resonators, pipes coming from the engine into the cabin, and you really notice more character coming through. You also get more on the overrun much more easily, so it's kind of as soon as you lift off you get those little sort of almost distant, hollow, sort of thunderous sort of cracks and rumbles.
Sadly, it doesn't sound anything like as good from the outside. And of course, you can make it completely silent and use the 7.45 kilowatt-hour battery to generate up to 152 brake horsepower and travel on electric power alone for up to 16 miles in e-drive mode.
After e-drive mode, you've then got hybrid, which obviously juggles the two, but most of the time you're going to want to be in performance, which keeps the engine lit the whole time.
And it is worth reiterating just how relentlessly fast it is. 0 to 124 miles an hour or 200 kilometers an hour in 7 seconds flat.
Wow! Through the corners, this feels every bit like what we've come to expect from these special mid-engine Ferraris. It's so light on its feet, so precise, so quick-witted. Laterally, these cars have never had huge amounts of feel through the steering, in fact. It's all through the kind of the sharpness, the precision, the really almost sort of microscopic precision of the steering. That's how you get your confidence with this and the front end of it. I love that when you drive one of these quickly, it feels so tight. As soon as you turn into a corner, it feels ready. The drivetrain feels wound up. Every input, whether it's steering, throttle or brakes, is absolutely instant. And yet, for all that kind of pent-up aggression, you still have this ride from the suspension, which is incredible.
The Magnaride dampers on this car do a remarkable job of coping with roads that often look like second cousin to a ploughed field, and you don't even need to use the bumpy road setting as much as you might think.
Weather's turning out quite nice now. Time for the track, I think. So this car might look pretty identical to the one that we had on the road. However, it is slightly different because we've now got the passive Multimatic dampers instead of the Magnaride adaptive ones. So they're just a single rate.
There are also 10% stiffer titanium springs and firmer anti-roll bars.
We've also got the carbon fibre wheels on this. We were hoping to have Cup 2R tyres on, but because it's been wet, they've left it on the Cup 2s. the overall effect of all the changes is we've supposedly got 4% greater lateral grip. Obviously that would be with the R tyre. We've also got 13% less roll. What does it all add up to? Essentially a car that's just a huge amount of fun. It's really smooth. It doesn't feel tough like, say, a sort of GT3 RS. Why does it feel fast? We're in qualifying mode now, as opposed to performance mode. So we've got the full 868 brake horsepower with the extra from the electric motor.
Total torque is 557 pounds-feet, and when you see a blue ring around the rev counter, it means the boost mode is available, and full throttle above 6,000 RPM will initiate the final 13 brake horsepower kick from the MG UK, and you can actually feel it.
The other thing we can now feel on track is fast shift. Wow, bit of air up over there. That's how much traction and speed we're going to get out of that corner. Love the sound of those shifts, and they're so quick. So you get this little kick on the upshift to help increase the feeling of acceleration. Coming down to this first turn here, that's where we can really lean on the new ABS Evo, which we felt in the wet on the road, but on the track you just lean into it so much. Wow, the braking is so good. There's so much feel through the pedal. And there's actually incredible traction as well, given all the power and torque going through those rear wheels. You can really easily meter it out. Right, let's put it into CT off. Come into here. Turn in a bit late. Feel the front. Just so smooth.
Whilst I am trying to do my best road tester assessment of the Speciale, part of me is also desperate just to drink in the experience of driving around this track, which is something I've wanted to do for, well, a very long time.
Because 25 years ago, you would have found me standing here, outside the circuit on Via Marsala. When I first visited Maranello with my father many years ago, I seemed to spend hours here just looking through the fencing, which was rather less sturdy and tall back then, trying to catch a glimpse of anything going around the circuit. I remember particularly being on the other side of town and hearing a V12 F1 car going around and dashing over here to try and get some photos of it. However, Fiorano hasn't always been here.
Prior to 1972, it was all about Modena, to the north of Maranello.
First, there was a 12-kilometre road circuit just to the west of the city. And the first two editions of the Modena Grand Prix in 1927 and 28 were won by none other than Enzo Ferrari, driving an Alfa Romeo 6C. Eventually, however, they decided that something more permanent was needed, so the Aero Autodromo di Modena was built.
At 2.3 miles long, with a runway stretching diagonally across the middle, it was fast and flat. The first Modena Grand Prix held here took place in 1950, and again Enzo Ferrari was victorious, but this time as a manufacturer, with Alberto Ascari driving a Ferrari 166 F2. The final Grand Prix here was held in 1961, but Maserati, Ferrari and Stanguellini continued to use the track for testing both race and road cars.
Eventually, with cars getting faster and faster and the track needing more and more modernisation, Enzo Ferrari decided to build Fiorano just down the road. Today, well, this is a huge public park, named after the man himself, with just a few reminders of what used to be here, with some statues and the old control tower for the airport.
Fiorano was built on a piece of agricultural land that Ferrari owned, and its myriad turns were designed to test all facets of a car. Famously, Enzo had a house right in the middle near the pits. There is now a new E-Vortex test track next door as well, but the high-speed testing will remain at Fiorano. The fastest ever lap was set by Michael Schumacher in an F2004, which completed the 3 kilometres or 1.8 miles in a hair under 56 seconds. The 296 Speciale will do a lap in 1 minute 19 seconds, 4.5 seconds faster than its Speciale namesake, 2 seconds faster than the 296 GTB, and 0.7 seconds faster than even a LaFerrari.
Wave at my former self. I've watched so many onboard laps around here. It's so much fun. Now trying it over the bridge here, this blind corner here, which always looks scary, and yes, it's quite a scary corner. It's a little bit off camber through there as well. Run it out to the curb, and then come down to turn 6. The hairpin down here. I've seen lots of skid shots out of here over the years. I've done a little slide on my own. Just when you're at the top end, it does feel easier to run into the limiter. There's not that crescendo, obviously, you would have had with a naturally aspirated engine. So you do need to watch the shift lights in the top of the wheel. Through these quick corners here, that's where you're going to feel the aero. So 435 kilos of downforce, which is 20% more than the GTB, and 70% of that is on the front axle, thanks to this. The aero damper, which if you compare GTB to Speciale, you can clearly see here, and it was one of the most difficult things apparently to, well, integrate into this because of things like pedestrian impacts, but also the aesthetics as well. Now you might be thinking, surely this is the same as the S-duct which you saw on the F8, but whereas that acted like a wing effectively, this is rather different. So in fact the vent just goes straight down. If you sort of cut it like that, you'd see it directly links to the floor. The idea generally is by linking the underfloor and the top of the body, you stabilise the pressure between the two, sort of, and wherever you are, so even under hard braking, so it makes the downforce that much more stable.
Where the F-duct pushed down, this sucks. Anyway, also helping with stability is the new mid-setting for the fast reacting active rear spoiler. The plane, by the way, is a Lockheed F-104 Starfighter, just like the one Gilles Villeneuve raced against with a 126 CK in 1981.
Coming up to the quick turn 7 now, take the outside line through here, feel it just drift across the road, it's so smooth. Short shift through there, deep braking into this final big corner. So this is sort of the reverse of Tarzan at Zandvoort. I don't think this feels quite as raw as some of the past cars, but its performance is still extraordinary. And the lovely thing is that even when you break traction, when it starts sliding, it's still driving forwards. It's not something that scares you. So a thrill doesn't have to be scary, but equally drivable doesn't have to be tame.
It really is huge amounts of fun. However, comparison is often described as the thief of joy, and I think there is a danger of that with this car. I wish they'd named it something other than Speciale, because I feel like it makes perhaps unfair comparison inevitable.
I think the 296 Speciale stands apart from its predecessors, the Challenge Stradale, the Scuderia, the 458 Speciale and the Pista. It's not quite as hardcore. To me it feels a bit more like a 296 GTB++. It is still fantastic on road and track. It is that little bit more aggressive and better to drive, but it's not quite as out and out hardcore. And I think there is a reason for that. I think there is headroom for something else above it in the future.